So let's talk about the breadcrumbing relationship cycle, what this means, and why anxiously attached individuals tend to choose breadcrumbers in relationships. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what you can do to actually break this cycle at a subconscious level so we don't keep reinvesting in people who are not going to make us happy. So, first and foremost, breadcrumbing, if you don't already know the term, is essentially sort of a slang term used to in relationships to find somebody who's essentially leaving breadcrumbs, like not able to really go all in, not able to really fulfill somebody in a relationship dynamic because they're not present enough or showing up enough to do so. And breadcrumbing in relationships, when you're dating somebody who's a breadcrumber, often you'll get sort of the wrath of intermittent reinforcement, which is essentially what gamblers get addicted to, right? Sometimes this person shows up and invests, and many, many times they don't. And you're sort of waiting for that magical moment where they do show up. And this, every so often sporadic moment where somebody can invest and really be a great part of the relationship dynamic. And then that being followed by all these moments that they don't, not only actually has the ability to create sort of this addictive dopamine hit in the brain, but also can really make somebody feel torn up inside because usually for every one moment that somebody's really showing up, there tend to be many, many moments where your expectations are let down, there's broken promises, there's sort of these temporary highs followed by these quite significant lows. And there's just a lack of stability and certainty in this kind of relationship dynamic. And so we have to really investigate why, if you're an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, are you investing in people who are not showing up in the way that you actually yearn for? And one of the biggest first reasons that we're going to talk about here, we'll cover four major components of this. One of the first big reasons is that there is this addictive component to it. There is this actual temporary high, and this attention that you get from the breadcrumber can lead to these sort of roller coaster of emotions. And when we have this intermittent high from something, it can cause us to actually become really emotionally intertwined and focused on how do we get more of this. Now, if we unpack underneath that for a second, okay, why does it cause you a temporary high? Well, because your baseline, if you're investing in somebody like this, honestly, your baseline has to be that you're not making yourself feel fulfilled on your own. And so this momentary attention from somebody is enough to make you feel really good because there's an absence of you being able to be present with yourself, connected to yourself, the ability to meet your own needs on a regular basis within the relationship to you. And so if you imagine for a moment, right, that you sort of have this bucket and this bucket represents all the needs that you have for connection. If there is a complete absence of self connection, if there's an absence of you really being able to enjoy your own company, show up for the relationship to yourself, invest in yourself, and then somebody comes along and pours a little bit of water into your bucket, it feels amazing. But that runs out so quickly, right? That's it's not enough to actually fill your cup. And so you get this temporary high followed by this longing for more of that. But if your baseline was such that you were actually able to meet your own needs on a regular basis and show up and support yourself in the relationship to yourself, you wouldn't feel at the mercy of somebody pouring just a little bit of something into your bucket and then leaving again, because you would actually feel fulfilled on your own time. And so we have to explore here under point number one, like, where are you at in the relationship to yourself? How well do you know yourself? How much time do you take to enjoy your own company, to understand yourself? How much time do you feel like you actually spend meeting your own needs? And what I mean by this, for example, is if you're somebody who has a need for exploration, do you feel comfortable exploring on your own? Do you go for a hike on your own or try a new hobby on your own or do something that fills your cup that you don't have to depend on other people for? Now, this isn't me saying like be so independent that you don't need anybody at all, because I don't believe in that. I believe that we are here as interdependent people. We are wired for this attachment to other people, absolutely. But we are also wired for a connected relationship to ourselves. We're wired for our own autonomy and authenticity in the relationship to self and understanding who we are. And it's not that either one of those is right or wrong. It's when they get out of balance that it becomes problematic. So, what I mean by this is if you're only focused on your relationships to other people and there's this absence of the relationship to self, the scales tip, and then we foster too much dependency on other people to make us happy. And this is going to be where you're really vulnerable to these temporary highs or to these aspects of intermittent reinforcement. And this means to balance the scales back out and to make sure that you are feeling worthwhile of the right relationships, we actually have to build up the relationship to ourselves. And this can really look like introspecting. This can look like digging into yourself, reading books, understanding your needs, learning your boundaries, learning what makes you happy and lights you up, and what your morals and values are, and designing your life to be a match to that. So that's really point number one. Point number two is if you are struggling with low self worth. A lot of low self worth is actually rooted in the stories we tell ourselves and essentially the beliefs we've acquired about ourselves over time. So, if we believe that we're not good enough, we're unworthy of love, we're unlovable, if we believe that we're never going to find somebody that really makes us happy, or there's nobody out there for us, if we have these painful self beliefs, it's like if you believe that you're not deserving, you believe that you're not worthy, and somebody gives you attention, you're like, how is this possible? How is this happening for me? And so we cling to things that may not even be that valuable to us and may actually come with a lot of pain involved if we don't believe we're worth anything better or more. And so a lot of this has to do with our own subconscious belief systems about ourselves. And what we have to do is recognize that in life, when we go through trauma, okay, and trauma isn't always these big traumatic events like an earthquake or an accident. Trauma is anything that we can't properly emotionally understand. And so we give meaning to things to try to understand it instead. And if we go through these painful or traumatic events, then what ends up taking place as a result of this is we give meaning to them in the name of certainty. So if somebody doesn't show up for you the way you need as a child, you're trying to understand it and you might make it mean, oh, I'm not good enough. And that's why nobody was here for me. And then if you take that story and that narrative for how you see yourself into all of your future life and relationships, then what ends up taking place from that point forward is that you are literally in a position where you believe this, and this is what you believe you're worthy of. If I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of anybody. Or if I believe I'm unworthy, I'm not worthy of a relationship or healthy love. And so we have to recognize that these stories and these pieces of meaning that we gave to past events can plague us all in the present and all in the future for decades to come. And so we have to learn that we can eradicate these things. These ideas get conditioned into you by your circumstances, and through principles of reprogramming and leveraging certain aspects of how we reprogram the subconscious mind, we can heal these things. We can change these things. So I want you to make a list of these painful stories you might tell yourself, these ideas about how you're not good enough or unworthy, or you're going to be alone forever, or you're never going to find somebody who loves you like this again. That's why you stay with the breadcrumber. I want you to make a list of these narratives that are there and really try to question them, really try to hold them into the light of your conscious mind instead of being these autopilot subconscious ideas you just continuously invest in, and question them. Are these really valid for me? Are these actually true? Or are these just ideas I accumulated and sort of adopted over time? And by the way, if you want to go much deeper into this topic, I have a whole course all about 21 ways to reprogram your subconscious mind. And I'll put the link in the description box below. But it's really all about ensuring that you have tools to recondition these painful ideas. Because when we carry these painful ideas, they can affect our lives in so many ways, not only in our relationships, but even in our career or our family relationship dynamics, our ability to handle and manage our own money. Like this really pops up everywhere. So self-worth, because these painful ideas can be a huge component. Another big dynamic here is the fear of loneliness. And if you're somebody who really fears being alone, again, it kind of goes back to point number one, where there's this old Wayne Dyer quote, and he says, you can't be lonely if you love the person you're alone with. And if we're finding ourselves in a position where we're scared to be alone, what that usually means is that you're scared to be with yourself, right? You're scared to do life with yourself because there's usually distance in the relationship to yourself there, right? If you feel like a stranger to yourself, it's kind of weird to be in your own company. And so again, we build up this relationship to ourselves by making sure that on our time that we spend alone, that we do things that actually build that relationship. The relationship to ourselves is a very, very real thing. And what I mean by building the relationship is things like you putting yourself in a position where when you spend your time alone, you ask yourself questions, right? Just if you're like on a date with somebody and getting to know them, you want to understand them. You ask them questions, you try to get them to open up, you share different things. And this is going to be a process for you. If you're somebody who's scared to be alone, it takes time to build the relationship to yourself, but this starts with healthy habits. This can look like, spending time introspecting a couple times a week, maybe taking up a meditation practice so you can observe your own thoughts and start to understand, like, who am I? And like, what's in here? This can include taking personal development courses. This can include, reading books that help you better understand yourself and your patterns. This can really just include you asking yourself, what's important to me? And figuring out, in your time alone, how you can enjoy that time, being intentional, cooking yourself a nice meal, having healthy self-care activities, actually doing things that fill your cup and take care of yourself, that are expressions of care and love. And so you can even take it a step further and look at, what are your different love languages, right? We have Dr. Gary Chapman's love languages. We've got physical touch, quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, and gifts. And like, when you look at these different love languages, how can you show yourself love through your own love languages? And this is where we end up actually learning to enjoy our time with ourselves. And then we're not making the fear of loneliness, we're not allowing the fear of loneliness to make our relationship decisions for us. And last but not least, um, past trauma or patterns. So often what happens is we have a subconscious comfort zone. And what we're most attracted to in relationship dynamics is essentially the way that we treat ourselves. So if you treat yourself in a way where you're like intermittently there for yourself, you're sometimes ignoring yourself, you're sometimes putting yourself on the back burner, unfortunately, you're going to continuously be attracted to people who mirror that back to you. That's the way the subconscious mind works. Because at the end of the day, the subconscious mind is survival wired. So it just wants to maintain its comfort zone. And so it's going to be so important for you to be like, okay, what's coming up here for me? How am I, treating the relationship to myself? Let me dig into that and recognize what's there. And as I clean up these patterns, that's how I'm going to actually be attracted to people in a different way. I'm going to be attracted to different things that people have to offer. I'm going to be attracted to different patterns. And as you do that work and that healing, that's going to be where your subconscious comfort zone for what you find attractive changes. And this will also be the place that you see red flags around breadcrumbers and see these things that, I don't want to put up with that in a relationship. That's not, in fact, what I'm looking for. And the more you're able to do that and back yourself, the healthier your future relationships will become. So, again, if you want to do a much deeper dive into reprogramming some of these patterns much more quickly, you can check out the 21 tools to reprogram your subconscious mind below. You can pick your favorite tool, plug it in, and really see that reprogramming happening. And it's free for 7 days. I'll leave that link below. And if you enjoyed this video or this channel, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. It definitely helps the algorithm here so much. And I really appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.